I always believed marriage was built on the little things. The morning coffee Daniel made for me even when he was running late. The way he placed his hand on my back in crowded places. The quiet moments when he brushed my hair behind my ear just to see me smile. After 8 years together, I thought we had uncovered every secret, every flaw, every fear. I was wrong. That evening began like any other, but I sensed something unusual in the air. Daniel paced around the living room, stopping, starting, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm a confession he didn't know how to speak. I watched him from the sofa, confused by the tension radiating from him. His eyes avoided mine, something he never did, not unless something was terribly wrong. "Emma," he finally said, his voice soft but trembling. "I need to tell you something. And I don't want you to think less of me." My heart tightened in an instant. The air felt heavier, colder. Thousands of possibilities flashed through my mind. Another woman, a hidden debt, a secret illness. I prepared myself for the worst, bracing as if for an impact. He sat beside me, but not too close. The space between us felt like a canyon. "I've been carrying this for years," he whispered. "I should have told you sooner. I just didn't know how." I swallowed hard. "Daniel, whatever it is, just tell me." He hesitated, then finally exhaled a confession he had locked inside his heart. A secret fantasy. A desire he'd been too afraid to share, worried it would make me see him differently, worried it would break the image of the man I believed him to be. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't lying. He was simply revealing a part of himself. He kept hidden because he feared I wouldn't understand. But the moment he said it, everything inside me shifted, not because his fantasy was shocking or dangerous, but because it reminded me of something I never considered. My husband had an inner world I had never asked about. Dreams, curiosities, shadows, questions, pieces of him that I had never bothered to explore. And suddenly, his confession felt like a mirror reflecting how distant we had quietly become. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The truth didn't hurt me. But the vulnerability in his eyes did. "Please say something," he whispered. "Anything?" I nodded weakly, trying to find my voice, trying to understand why a simple confession made my heart beat with fear instead of understanding. I wasn't angry. I wasn't disgusted. I was unsure, unprepared, off balance, and the silence between us grew louder than any argument we'd ever had. That night, after he went to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. His confession replayed in my mind, but something deeper troubled me. I realized I didn't know my husband as completely as I thought, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt both close to him. And miles away, it was the moment everything began to change. Woke the next morning with the weight of Daniel's confession still pressing on my chest. The sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, warming the room, yet everything felt cold. Daniel stood by the kitchen counter making coffee, just like always, but something in the air had shifted. The familiar rhythm of our mornings felt strained, like a song played slightly out of tune. He looked up when I entered, his smile fragile, unsure. "Did you sleep?" he asked. I nodded, though the truth was I'd barely closed my eyes. Doubt had kept me awake, doubt not about him, but about us. About what else I might not know. About what else he might be too afraid to say. His confession wasn't dangerous or immoral, but it was intimate, deeply personal, and it made me realize how many silent territories existed between us. Daniel handed me a cup of coffee, but his hand lingered, waiting for reassurance I couldn't give. I pulled away too quickly. I saw the pain flash in his eyes and guilt twisted in my stomach. I wasn't angry with him. I wasn't even hurt. I was unsettled deeply, profoundly unsettled. Later, while folding laundry, I replayed everything, the tremble in his voice, the way his shoulders sagged with relief when he finally told me, how terrified he looked afterward. He wasn't trying to deceive me. He wasn't acting out. He wasn't betraying me. He was trying to trust me. So why did it feel like trust had broken instead? For years I had convinced myself that marriage meant knowing everything about each other, knowing the predictable patterns of our love, the comfort of routine. But now I saw how easy it was to overlook the quiet corners of a person's soul. My mind spiraled with questions. Had he felt alone? Had he been hiding other things? Had I made him feel unsafe to be himself with me? Every thought cut deeper. By lunchtime, everything he did seemed to echo with the confession. When he laughed, it sounded forced. When he touched my shoulder, I froze. When he asked what I wanted for dinner, I heard a pleading in his voice, not for food, but for normalcy. I couldn't give it to him. Not yet. He noticed, of course. "Emma," he said gently, "talk to me, please." I opened my mouth, but only silence came out, because I didn't know how to explain the hollow feeling inside me, the sense that something fundamental had shifted beneath our marriage, like a foundation cracking quietly over time. That evening, I sat on our bed staring at our wedding photo. We looked young, hopeful, untouched by secrets. I remembered how sure I had been that nothing could shake us. Now, wasn't sure of anything. Daniel knocked softly. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He sat beside me, close enough to feel his warmth, yet far enough that I sensed the distance growing between us. "We'll be okay," he whispered. "We're strong. We'll get through this." I wanted to believe him. I truly did, but doubt had already taken root, and it was quietly, steadily spreading. The tension in our home didn't explode, it seeped slowly, like water through cracks you didn't notice until the floor was already damaged. Daniel kept trying to act normal, and I kept trying to pretend I wasn't shaken, but the silence between us grew heavier each day. What haunted me wasn't his confession itself. It was the possibility that our marriage wasn't as transparent as I always believed. And when you start feeling alone in your own relationship, temptation finds its way in quietly. It began on a Wednesday afternoon at work. I sat at my desk staring blankly at my computer screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat I couldn't control. That's when Ethan knocked on the frame of my cubicle. "You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders," he said, half joking but also strangely perceptive. I forced a smile. "Just tired." "Tired looks different," he said gently. "This looks like things hurting." He wasn't someone I talked to often, just a coworker whose kindness always felt effortless. But in that moment, when I was drowning in confusion and insecurity, his presence felt like oxygen. I didn't tell him anything personal that first day, but he stayed a little longer than necessary, making small talk until I laughed, a small broken laugh I didn't know I needed. He left with a smile, and I sat there wondering why talking to him felt easier than talking to my husband. The next day, he stopped by again. And the next. What started as brief conversations turned into longer ones. Coffee breaks, shared lunches, moments where he simply listened. He noticed things Daniel was too distracted or too worried to see. "You're quiet today," he said one afternoon. "Did something happen?" I hesitated. "Just complicated feelings." "You don't have to tell me," he said. "But I'm here if you ever want to." That offer stayed with me long after he walked away. At home, Daniel tried to bridge the gap between us, but the more he tried, the more I shut down. It wasn't intentional. It was fear. Fear of hurting him. Fear of hurting myself. Fear of discovering that maybe we weren't as invincible as I imagined. And into that emotional vacuum, Ethan stepped in without ever meaning to. One afternoon, when my eyes filled unexpectedly with tears while talking to him, he didn't pry. He simply handed me a tissue and said, in a voice so gentle it felt dangerous, "You deserve to feel understood." Something inside me cracked. For the first time since Daniel's confession, I felt seen not as a wife trying to be strong, not as someone carrying silent confusion, but as a woman who needed comfort and didn't know how to ask for it. That scared me, because emotional closeness is its own kind of temptation, and sometimes it's even more dangerous than anything physical, and in my vulnerability, I let that door stay open, not realizing how far it would eventually lead me. Lines don't often blur all at once. They fade, slowly, like chalk in the rain-softened weekend, until one day you step over them without realizing you've crossed something sacred. That's how it happened with Ethan. There was no dramatic moment, no whispered seduction, just quiet friendship becoming something deeper and dangerously comforting. It happened on a Friday evening. The office was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. I had stayed late, pretending to catch up on work when in truth, I was avoiding going home, avoiding facing the tension with Daniel that had grown like a shadow neither of us could escape. Ethan appeared at my desk, holding 2 cups of warm tea. "You didn't eat lunch," he said softly. "Thought you could use this." I accepted the cup, grateful and embarrassed. "You shouldn't keep doing this," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "What?" he asked. "Caring?" The word hit harder than it should have. He pulled a chair beside me. We talked about stress, fears, broken expectations, how relationships sometimes feel like holding a fragile vase you're terrified to drop. He didn't ask what Daniel had done. He didn't push for details. He just listened, offering the kind of emotional presence I had been craving without admitting it to myself. At one point, my voice cracked. I tried to hide it, but tears slipped anyway. Ethan reached out instinctively, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. A simple gesture, yet intimate enough to send a tremor through my heart. I didn't pull away. I should have. I knew that. But I DN single quotes to instead. I let the moment linger, his hand on my cheek, his eyes searching mine with concern, not desire. That made it feel even more dangerous. "Emma," he whispered, "you're hurting so much. You don't have to pretend with me." Something inside me broke open. Not romantically, not yet, but vulnerably, emotionally. I felt seen in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe months. Maybe longer. What happened next wasn't physical betrayal. But it was a different kind of unfaithfulness, quieter, deeper, easier to hide. And harder to forgive. I told him things I should have told my husband. Fears I had swallowed. Confusion I had buried. Feelings I didn't dare voice at home. And he listened with an intensity that made me feel protected and exposed all at once. When he finally walked me to my car, he placed a hand on my arm. "You don't deserve to feel alone," he said softly. I looked at him too long. He looked at me too deeply. No kiss. No embrace. No touch beyond his hand on my arm. But in that gaze, those seconds of suspended breath, I crossed the line inside my heart, because emotional betrayal starts long, before lips ever meet. And that was the unthinkable truth I couldn't deny. I had given a piece of myself to someone who wasn't my husband, and once you give away even a fragment, you can never pretend it means nothing. Guilt doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives quietly, crawling under your skin and settling into the spaces where truth and fear collide. After that night with Ethan, after the moment when I let my heart wander where it had no right to go, I felt guilt like a constant pulse. Every heartbeat whispered the same word: wrong, wrong, wrong. When I got home, Daniel was in the kitchen cooking dinner. He looked up with a hopeful smile that fractured something inside me. "You're late," he said softly, trying to sound casual. "Long day?" I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. He didn't press further. He rarely did, and for the first time I wondered whether his gentleness had been a silent plea for closeness that I never recognized. As we ate, Daniel tried to talk light things, small things, but my mind spiraled elsewhere. Every question he asked felt like a test I was failing. Every glance felt like it carried suspicion. Even though he had no idea what I was hiding, and that was the worst part, he didn't know. And yet I treated him like he was the one hurting me. After dinner, he approached me cautiously, like I was made of glass. "Emma, I feel like I keep losing you. I don't know how to fix it." His voice trembled. I remembered the way Ethan said, "You don't have to feel alone." The comparison burned like acid. I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." A lie so small it felt almost harmless. But lies multiply fast when the heart is conflicted. That night, as Daniel slept beside me, his arm draped around my waist like it had countless nights before, the guilt became unbearable. His warmth should have comforted me. Instead, it made me feel like a thief stealing his trust while pretending I deserved his love. I stared at the ceiling, tears soaking into the pillow. How had I let things fall apart so quickly? How had one confession, one moment of vulnerability led us here? But the truth hit me hard. It wasn't his confession that broke us. It was my response to it. My silence. My retreat. My fear. I had punished him for trusting me. And in doing so, I'd opened the door for someone else to fill the space I created. The moment of reckoning came the next morning. Daniel stood at the table with 2 cups of coffee, another habit of love I had stopped appreciating. He handed me one, but when I reached for it, his hand lingered. His eyes searched mine with desperation I had ignored for too long. "Emma," he said quietly, "I love you. But I don't feel like you're here anymore. I feel like I'm losing you, piece by piece." I couldn't breathe. His voice was breaking. And so was he. "I need to know what's happening," he said. "Please, don't shut me out." Not again. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who trusted me enough to confess his deepest fear, and whom I betrayed in the silence that followed. The guilt was no longer whispering. It was screaming, and I knew I couldn't hide anymore. The morning Daniel confronted me, everything inside me crumbled. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. It was scared. It was raw. And hearing him say he was losing me pierced through every layer of guilt I had tried to drown. For the first time in weeks, I didn't look away. I forced myself to face the pain in his eyes, the pain I had helped create. "I need to tell you something," I whispered. His face paled. He sat down slowly, bracing himself for the kind of truth that changes everything. My hand shook as I spoke. I told him about the emotional distance that grew after his confession. I admitted how confused I felt, how I spiraled into doubt instead of talking to him. And then, the hardest truth of all, I told him about Ethan. Not in graphic detail, not with blame, but honestly, I never kissed him, I said. I never wanted anything physical. But I talked to him about things I should have talked to you about. I let him into places that belonged to us. "I'm so sorry, Daniel." He didn't shout. He didn't walk away. He just closed his eyes, and for the longest moment, neither of us moved. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't you come to me? Why was a stranger safer than your own husband?" The question broke me. "I was scared," I cried. "Scared of hurting you. Scared of disappointing you. Scared that if I asked the wrong question, everything would fall apart." "And instead," he said quietly, "you let it fall apart anyway." Tears streamed down his face, slow, quiet tears that hurt more than any anger could. But then something unexpected happened. He reached for my hand. His fingers trembled against mine, and his voice cracked as he whispered, "I don't want to lose you. Not over a fantasy. Not over fear. Not over a mistake we can fix if we try." I wasn't prepared for forgiveness. I didn't feel worthy of it. "You're hurt," I said. "You should be angry. I am, he admitted. But I also love you. And love means staying when everything feels broken. If there's still something worth saving. He wiped his tears. I wiped mine. And for the first time since his confession, we talked. Really talked. We talked about fears we never voiced. About expectations we never clarified. About the emotional distance we both allowed to grow. We talked about therapy. About boundaries. About rebuilding trust, not perfectly, but gradually. It wasn't easy. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a magical fix. It was work, honest, painful work. But as we sat there, hands intertwined, I realized something important. Love isn't proven when things are easy. Love is proven when both people choose to stay, even when walking away seems simpler. Daniel chose me. And for the first time in weeks, I chose him back, not out of guilt, not out of fear, but because underneath the mistakes, the silence, the confusion, we still loved each other enough to try again, and that was the beginning of our healing.